electric.
Hi everyone, welcome back for another video. Today I wanted to cover my configuration. It's a video that's been requested by a lot of you in the comments before, so I thought I would get this video out before my end of month statistics. Basically I want to talk about this chart. I've drawn up this chart to try and give a pictorial view of what my configuration is and to try and simplify it. Now, for those that are interested in wiring up their own Victron inverter for their battery configurations, I really am afraid that I'm not an electrician. I can't tell you cable specs, I can't tell you the in and outs of the actual installation because I used a professional installer to install mine. Mine's more about the logical design, what I've designed, what I've chosen and why I've chosen it. And then I can try and give you a description of how it's connected and the implications of some of those connections. So I'll do my best to share as much information as I can, but I do appreciate that some are going to want more. I'm afraid you'll have to go to professional electricians that are qualified to talk about these things for that information. So let's start right from the beginning. Solar. I have 3 solar arrays. How did I get to where I am and why did I choose these systems? The first one was a 3.9 kilowatt array of solar panels with a 3.6 kilowatt Solis inverter. I chose that because of the price and because of E.ON offering that good price, and they seemed available. They came with a good recommendation as well. And I basically got, I wouldn't say I got done over by them, but I got the typical sales fob off of that's all you can get on your roof. And it was, a 4 kilowatt system, 3.6 kilowatt inverter. That's what they throw at you because it's easy. These big companies that want to churn out installations only want the easy installations where they don't have to make D&O applications for G99 approval of exporting more. That's why I got stuck with the 3.9 kilowatt system. I was happy with that. I thought that was good. I was on my way. I was learning about solar and I didn't know anything compared to what I know now. Luckily I came across Christian at Power Different and he quoted me for, well, originally it was 3 extra panels on my garage roof is what I was looking for. But when he came and had a look at what we had, he said, you know what, I think I can get another 8 panels if we move those ones that E.ON installed. So a really good installer that knew what he was doing, knew what you could do, was happy to make the application for me for the G99 to the D&O. So we ended up going with 8 Solaredge panels on the top of the E.ON configuration. And I didn't go for the 3 panels on the garage roof, and I really don't know why. I suppose looking back I ran out of money. Looking back it was more about what I could afford at the time, and at the time I couldn't afford any more, so I did what I could. I installed the second array. I didn't put the garage ones on. I chose Solaredge more because it was Christian's recommendation. He really likes the Solaredge brand and their reliability and service and support. So I was influenced by the installer for going with Solaredge. I ended up being quite happy with Solaredge based on their app and the interface that you have for monitoring your solar generation. So I like Solaredge. But it was a bit of a waste and it was a bit of a pain really, because I went with a small inverter that had these special optimizers where it's 2 panels per optimizer. So if I wanted to extend the configuration to the garage, then I've obviously got to take those optimizers off and put the single panel optimizers on. What I went for was great for the extra 2.4 kilowatts of solar, the 8 panels that I added. And great for the extra solar power, but planning ahead and wanting more, it wasn't the best decision. So looking back, that Solaredge inverter, I really should have gone with a bigger powered system, put the 3 garage panels on as well and had the single optimizers, and that would have been better. That also would have then impacted my third array, because when I had a third bite at the cherry when funds allowed, I put panels on my gable, the east gable. And I chose that over the north-facing side because I wanted solar power in the winter, and I was aware that the panels on the north-facing roof would probably generate diddly squat in the winter, and that's when I wanted some extra power. I've already got an excess in the summer, so adding even more in the summer wouldn't necessarily give me the benefit I was looking for. The east panels were a more economical, cheaper implementation and would give me some more power in the winter. So I knew I was wasting a bit of money putting those gable panels on because I spent a lot of money with scaffolding. It's the installation costs. 3 installs of solar panels, the scaffolding alone is a large proportion of those installations. So not the wisest of decisions. Putting the gable panels on and the 3 garage panels as a third option when it could have been the second option. So my solar route to getting what I've got now has been, say, an awkward one and a wasteful one. I've wasted some money on scaffolding and the different installations, but I didn't have the money at the time, and it has been an evolution I've learned along the way, which is why I like to share these things, because the advice I keep giving now is, if you're going to put solar on, don't skimp. Push as much as you can, get as many solar panels as you can, because you will want more later, and then you'll spend more money later doing it. Prices will go up, and also the extra scaffolding, etc. Just makes sense to do it in one go. But you know, I've learned along the way, and I've taken 3 bites of the cherries, and now I've got the 3 panels on the garage roof. That's an extra 1.1 kilowatts. I've got the 4 panels on my east gable. That's, I think, about 1.8 kilowatts of solar panels. They don't get anywhere near that. Combined, the 1.1 and the 1.8 arrays that I've got, or strings, they generate a max during the day in the summer of 1.6 kilowatts between the two, because the sun's either hitting one or the other, and the 1.8 kilowatts never maxes out because they're vertical on the wall, so I never get the best solar power from them. But they all add good generation, they all add good power, and they end up meaning that I have enough power, more than I need, for most months of the year. So that's the solar configuration. They're all AC coupled, they're all AC connected, they're all grid tied. So I don't have any DC solar going into the back of my Victron inverter. I don't have a hybrid inverter at all. Now, partly, let's talk about that. Why have I gone for all these grid-tied AC solar connections? And mostly it's because I can see it. I can see them all in one place, so I can aggregate all the solar together and I can get a single figure for my solar. So it's data orientated, it's my visibility of them in the apps. That makes sense to me over the losses that I have of converting from DC to AC, AC to DC, and all those sort of things. The extra losses that you would get through having them configured as I have, rather than directly connected in the back of the inverter, going from your solar panels to your battery separately. If you want to know more about the difference between hybrids and AC connected, then there's a separate video that I did on that. Have a search on YouTube for EV puzzle hybrid and AC coupled, and you should find that. And of course, in the winter when it counts, you're importing from the grid on AC, and hence you've got those conversion losses anyway. It's only when you're bringing in the energy from the solar and charging into batteries during the summer, that's when you have most of your losses, but that's when I have a solar excess anyway. When I installed the battery though with the Victron inverter, because I made that decision, and I'll talk about that in just a moment, there was a big decision. Shall I install using MPPTs, these smart blue MPPTs from Victron? And that would have meant I didn't need the Solis inverter for the garage panels and the east gable. I could have done that, and that would have been efficient, and it would have been good, and it would have helped in an off-grid situation. If there's power cuts, I'd have had those solar panels all going through. There was a lot of benefits of doing that. But again, I would have separated it. Then I'd have had some solar going through DC connected, not visible apart from inside the Victron system, and then some solar panels I'd have had visible on the AC side. So the Myenergi app would see it. My kitchen monitoring device, it's a Geo Minim that I use, an ex-British Gas in-house display meter that monitors my solar from that AC cable, on aggregating all my solar, and it comes through into my kitchen. So I've taken a conscious decision not to install DC connected. Now, it does make me feel, now I've got enough AC connected. If I do anything else, it will be DC, and I don't mind that it won't be visible. It is just an excess now, it's the extra. So I think if I add any more, it will be with MPPTs in the back of the Victron. So that probably is a good time now to talk about the Victron inverter. Why did I choose that? I did a video on the ultimate battery solution and why I think it's ultimate for me. And you know, Victron was a company that I wanted to purchase from because I just saw them as reliable. I saw them as decent support. There's lots of online support. I can use them independently. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of manual side to it. So, you know, I can have control of the configuration. But mostly it's a company that's not going to go bust. It's not a company that's here today, gone tomorrow. So, you know, a couple of years down the road from buying the battery or the inverter, I don't want to find that they've disappeared or they've made something else and it's not compatible. I wanted some longevity in the system, so I chose Victron mostly for that, but also because of the data that's available. It's not just great on the VRM application, but it's also great from a point of view of open data that I can see it through Home Assistant and stuff, and that is working really, really well. I must confess that I was apprehensive of using Home Assistant to monitor my Victron battery and my configuration to start with, but now that I'm using it integrated with lots of other things, it is my go-to interface. So anyway, I chose the Victron inverter for those reasons, and I went with Pylontech because they're the most modular, value for money solution that I could see out there. The longevity of the batteries looks fine, the controllability looks fine. They just ticked every box, and it was, you know, mostly the modular side that I was happy to go with. And the downside of going with Pylontech was the visual side. Some people don't like the DIY look of it and wires being visible and those sort of things, but that's part of the benefit of having the modular. So the modular side of it and being able to grow the system if I wanted in an easier way was something that was more important to me than how it looked and whether it was a nice clean looking Tesla Powerwall box on the wall, etc. So that's why I went for Pylontech, and that's why I chose Victron. So just talking about the configuration, you can see on the chart that I've got an isolation switch after the meter on the top left hand side of the chart. So the isolator is to isolate the grid, and that basically puts me in an off-grid mode. So I'm running my house through the battery of the Victron inverter, and I lose all my solar panels at the time because all of the solar is not connected on the critical circuits of the Victron inverter. All of my solar is connected to the grid, and therefore if the grid goes down, my solar goes down. I decided that in the UK we don't have power cuts for many minutes, if not many hours, unless there is a natural disaster going on. So the chance of having more than a day without your power, or a couple of days, is extremely rare. So I didn't need solar. I mean, we really are talking about a disaster, aren't we, if I need to be off grid for a week or two. So the battery alone is enough to get me through most power cuts unless there is a physical disaster. But if I add some solar at some point, or I move some of that solar onto the critical circuits of the Victron inverter, then I can have a true off-grid capability, and hence the isolation switch is there for those purposes. The grid meter is next to it, so it's the first thing that's seen from the actual grid connection outside of the house. It's the first thing where I'm monitoring import and export. That grid meter, it's an ET112 Victron Carlo Gravazzi device. That's the only ones that are supported with Victron. A little bit weird that it's an Italian company, but seems to do the job. That connects with a, let's get this right, RS485 interface, then across to USB and connects into the GX device. So next on the right hand side, that little blue oblong box is a GX. The GX is basically the brains for a Victron inverter. Most other inverters have all the same sort of functionality. They have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and they have logic to control what you're doing and connect and look at MPPTs and bring in all that solar power. They all have this functionality, but Victron choose to put it in a separate box, a GX device. So the inverter itself won't work unless it's being run by a GX device. You can buy Victron inverters with a GX inside, so it's a GX model, or you can have a separate box. So I went for the separate way. You know, like hi-fi is sometimes better if you buy separate components, but I look at it more like the fridge freezer concept. If you buy a fridge freezer and the fridge breaks, well, your freezer's gone as well. So having the GX device separate to the Victron inverter, I chose it for the pure reason of, if the GX device goes or the Victron inverter goes, I can replace one or the other and I don't lose both. But of course, if the GX goes, then that is the brains of the Victron inverter. So if I have a power down of my GX device, then I lose my Victron inverter. So it's a chicken and egg situation. You know, I need both. But here's one of the weird things with the Victron inverter configuration that I've got is, because I've got all of my house, so if you look below the Victron inverter you can see the consumer unit for the house. All of my house comes on the outside of the Victron inverter. It's all protected as critical circuits. But if the Victron inverter, the batteries and the GX device, any of that goes down, then I basically have a power cut in my house because it's not grid connected. I don't have a cable that goes from the grid directly to my consumer unit. So I'm at risk of a Victron failure giving me a grid failure within the house. So which is more reliable? Is the grid more reliable, or is the Victron equipment more reliable? And this is where I must confess I've had a couple of outages now because of configuration changes to the Victron system, where basically the house has gone down because all of the power is provided by the Victron solution. So it does make me wonder whether the perfect solution actually is a partly critical circuits, partly grid connected circuits. Is that the best way of going? Is going completely everything through the Victron not the right thing to do? Not quite sure. I mean, it's up to you to make decisions about what your priorities are. I chose everything through the critical circuits mostly because it meant a little bit more efficiency on the ramp up and ramp down, and also it is nice if you do have a power cut that everything works. But there is the downside that if the Victron goes down or the Victron needs to be powered off for maintenance and anything like that, then I lose all power to my house. So it's something to think about for the future. Will I change this configuration? Will I split that consumer unit into two, and one on critical circuits, one on not? Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the right solution is. I think you can probably read between the lines and think that a split system is probably the right way to go. Anyway, on the other side of the GX device, we've got another ET112 meter. That is for monitoring solar. So that's again just around an AC live cable. And same RS485 with USB connecting into the GX device. So those 2 meters are showing me what's going on solar and also what's going on with the grid import and export. Collectively, that then gives me all the data in the VRM apps about battery in, battery out, grid import, grid export, and all solar. It gives me a full view of the configuration. So having those 2 meters was essential. My understanding of the install that I've done, you can use CT clips, CT clamps. It is possible to do that. You don't have to use these ET112s, but that is the recommended route from Victron. The problem I had lots of installation problems that have lasted quite a while, and it was because of one dodgy ET112 and can you believe a USB cable as well. Those were the components that were failing and causing lots of problems here. The other problem that I had was the positioning of the ET112 meter, the very top left-hand one for the grid in. That was positioned in slightly the wrong position, and the Zappi wasn't getting seen by that grid meter, so the Zappi was on the wrong side of it. So again, just a change of where the cabling went and where that meter was, getting that meter at the first point solved those problems for me. Just quickly, we've got the Eddi down the bottom and the Mixergy tank, which went in last week. Those come off my main consumer unit, so they are on the critical circuits as well. Why have I got so much power on my critical circuits, and how on earth do I cater for that? And I'll try and explain it in a way that makes sense to me, but it's probably still not going to make sense to everyone there. That the Victron unit that I have has a 50 amp transfer switch, so it can have 50 amps of 240, 250 volts going through it while I'm connected to the grid, and that's what it can transfer when there's a grid outage. So that's its maximum capability. That gives me a grid limit. I can't bring more than 50 amps into my consumer unit. So why on earth have I done that? Well, I'm happy that 50 amps is quite a lot. It's 12, 13 kilowatts. That's a huge amount of power, and I don't use that much power, apart from times where, I don't know, say the grid is paying me very cheap in the morning and I'm charging the car, heating the hot water, recharging the battery, heating the house in winter. Let's say it was a really windy day and it was negative pricing with Agile, then I'd be using everything I possibly can. Then I'd be getting quite close to it. So that's one reason I've put the Zappi outside of that 50 amps. So I've got the 50 amps plus I've then got the 32 amps on the Zappi charger as well. But also the Eddi and the Zappi both have grid limits on them, don't they? They have amp restrictions, so if it goes over 49 amps then it'll start throttling down as well. So I can comfortably keep within my 50 amps at grid voltage levels. So the big question is if I'm using 8, 9, 10 kilowatts of power and I lose the grid, then obviously my critical circuits can't support 8, 9, 10 kilowatts of power being delivered through the Victron inverter, because it can only invert out of those batteries 5,000 VA. That's the rating of my inverter. It's a 48/5000. 48 volts for the battery, 5,000 for the VA, the volts times amps. That's what I can produce. And when you're running in backup mode off a battery, the voltage isn't 240, 250 volt anymore. It's 48, 50 volts. So I'm limited to a lot less power. So what will happen in that situation? Well, I guess you get a peak and the device can cater for that peak for a few seconds, but then it will trip, it will go into overload, and you will lose you'll lose your power and the unit will reset, and obviously your devices hopefully won't turn on again, and then you get another reset and get into a loop. Hopefully you'll then just turn on the devices that you need to power yourself. So it's about the limits of that transfer capability, and that's why I've configured it as I am. In an ideal world I'd have 2 of these, and hence I've got a 100 amp capability of transfer switching, and I'd have more batteries and all those sort of things, but you can keep building and building and building. How big do you need the system? And I worked out, in a power cut situation, the Victron inverter with a 5000 VA and these batteries are plenty to run the entire house, hot water, heating, because if you have a power cut, you're not going to heat your hot water anymore. You're going to cope, you're going to get by, you're not going to turn your oven on, you're going to use an air fryer, you're going to minimise what you do in case you need to last on that power for a prolonged period of time. So you will change, you will reduce things. So as long as you're aware there's been a power cut, and that's the challenge because it is quite seamless, then you should be absolutely fine. Again, in a perfect world, I guess I would have some solar on there, so if we did have a natural disaster and we were down for weeks here in Norfolk, I mean, highly unlikely, but if that was to happen, then I would need some solar connected on the DC side, and that would then give me a pure off-grid capability. So maybe in the future that's something I'll add, a solar capability. Maybe there'll be ground-mounted panels, and that will be my off-grid solar capability. You can see in there's a links box, so the blue box between the Victron inverter and the batteries. That was installed purely to be able to split the 2 strings of batteries. We've got 5 US3000 Pylontech batteries in there, and you can only have 4 in a single string, so we've got 2 strings, one of 3, one of 2, and that means we can connect the multiple cables into the links unit. I was also told they did it to make sure that the cables wouldn't get too hot as well, so they could split these connections, and that seems to work really well. So it's just I don't know what you'd call it. It's just an interface connection. It's probably not really necessary, but my installer decided to go that route. They thought that was the best solution for me. One of the things that I've understood about this Lynx 1000 is I can connect other things to it. If I wanted a smart shunt from Victron, I could connect that on the end of the Lynx 1000 as well. And if I wanted any other DC power connections, then I could connect them via that as well. So it has some uses for the future as well, and it wasn't that expensive, £100 and something. Alright, let's finish off with a couple of the other details on the chart there. So we've got the Zappi over the other side. I've only drawn it out of the way because that's where it fitted on the chart, but basically that connects to the grid side, not off the back of the battery. So I've shown at the top the in-house display next to the internet sign. I've got that display, and that connects to the AC solar. You can see there also I've also drawn in a little device above my Solaredge inverter. That's a watt node mod bus, so it's basically exactly the same as the Carlo Gravazzi ET112. It's a clamp that goes around the cable and monitors the power going in and out, and there's some logic inside this mod bus that communicates with the Solaredge, and it is a single device. This watt node mod bus is what is used with Solaredge. It's the only thing that's compatible, and that provides my monitoring with the import and export. So it's what shows consumption on the Solaredge graphs. You can see what solar you're generating, but if you want to see what consumption of that you have in your house, then it needs to know what's going on with the grid, how much you're importing and exporting. So that's what that watt node Modbus is for there. It's to give me better data on my charts in Solaredge. While we're talking about that, there's Solis inverters. You can see there at the bottom of them, there's 2 like microphone looking things there, the Wi-Fi communicators that send the data out from my Solaredge inverters off to the cloud for Jinlong Solis, their monitoring platform. So the Wi-Fi connections are there. I have installed, while we put the Mixergy tank in, I have installed a mini hub for my router, so I can now put hard RJ45 cables in and start to take out those Wi-Fi connections. They're not quite as reliable. I would like an RJ45 connection to my GX device and also those Solis inverters. So that's on my list of things to do. I'm told my installer has some RJ45 Solis inverters, and I've swapped with the 3G one that I had, so eventually I'll get those and we'll end up more reliable on RJ45, connected straight through the back of the wall. I'm very lucky that at the back of my inverters, where they are on the wall in the garage, the room on the other side is where my broadband router is. So it's very easy to drill through, and we've now got a hole through the wall and lots of cables going through for it. The last little thing on the internet side, obviously, you know, we do have to communicate to the internet from these Wi-Fi devices, but some of them are hard connected. So the little blue device there, that's the Home Assistant blue box that I have. It's a little microcomputer that does all of my interfaces, providing all of the data together in the Home Assistant system. So I'll discuss that separately. I don't want to talk about monitoring in this video, but that exists and connects there physically at the back of my routers, and also so does the hub device from Myenergi. So the hub is the internet connection, the internet router that connects to my broadband router, and that provides the internet connection for the Eddi and Zappi, and that's how my app and my monitoring occurs for that. If you've got a really modern Zappi, it might have Wi-Fi within now, so you don't need those hubs, but initially when the Zappi 1 and the early Zappi 2s came out, you needed a hub to provide that Wi-Fi connectivity. Let's have a look through the chart. I think that's covered about everything. So yeah, the only thing I haven't really discussed in any detail is the Mixergy tank. So a very quick mention on that. I decided, because I needed to do some work, to have my tank serviced and immersion changed, not to spend good money after bad and renew bits on my old tank. I decided to get a new tank, and if I'm going to buy a new tank, buy some new technology. So I wanted to go with the Mixergy tank because it had lots of features that meant it should be more efficient, it should provide me with more hot water. I didn't need such a big tank either. I could reduce down from 180 litres, or is it 170 litres? I can't remember which I had before. 170, and we've gone down to a 150 litre tank. So the reasons for that are energy saving, and also I wanted all the smart features that Mixergy provided, and that is a little bit sad because that has not worked out how it should have done. That has not worked out to my satisfaction. I'm happy with the hot water side of things with Mixergy. I'm happy with how the mechanical side of things works inside the tank, but the smart features I'm very disappointed with because they don't integrate with the solar PV diverter option that they've sold, and I'll cover that in a separate video. Yeah, that is just disappointing. It works, I'm happy-ish with it, but as a solution I feel I've sort of been conned a little bit, and I haven't got a smart hot water tank like I thought I had, or I do have. I just can't use it in the configuration that I've acquired. Anyway, that's my configuration. That's what I've got. I am with the OCTOPUS Energy company for my tariff. You can see that in the top left hand corner with the lovely pink octopus and the in-house display. Probably the weak link in all of my system is that in-house display. If that goes down, I don't believe they send you a new one, and I don't know how easy it would be to get another one. So that probably is the weak link in there. That's the most vulnerable component in my configuration. I think I've covered everything there, so if you've got any questions, I will try to answer them in the comments. I hope that makes sense as to what I've gone for and why I've gone for it. I haven't even mentioned wind turbines, but that was part of going with the Victron unit. It gave me the ability to add a DC connected wind turbine if I wanted at some point in the future as well. The Victron inverter and battery solution that I've got just meant I could do more for the future if I wanted to. So I hope this makes sense. I hope I've explained it in a way that doesn't leave you bamboozled too much, and I wish you luck with your systems. Whatever you're designing, whatever you're going for, the more solar the better. The more power and energy that you generate and you use, the better, rather than paying energy companies. I wish you all luck in this energy crisis, and I hope you're not locked in with horrible tariffs and year-long, 2-year-long waits to get hold of your solar panels. It's a really difficult time. I am so lucky that I saw what was coming. I saw I needed to be independent, and I saw that all the way from 2013 when I bought my last diesel car, and I knew that I had to go electric car next. Then in 2018 I bought the car, got the solar, and then it was just go, go, go. Everything was electric, and converting all my gas, oil, petrol, diesel, heating oil, everything, every energy is to be converted to electric because I'm producing my own, so electric is the cheapest because it's my own energy. That's the strategy, that's what I'm doing, and that's what's working and paying dividends right now. I don't have high energy bills, and I hope you can do similar. You don't have to do exactly the same as I've got. You don't have to go with Victron inverters and Pylontech and Solis. You know, there are lots of choices out there. What's important is it works right for you, and that's one of the things that I'm going to talk about in another video in the future. I want to talk about how to size a home storage battery, and it's not necessarily about a calculation and using a specific bit of data. It's working out what you want from it, what are your priorities, and your priorities are different to mine, and that's what's really important in these configurations, that your priorities are there in your configuration. The key to getting that is to find a really good installer, one that will listen and that will work with you and deliver what you want. They're not easy to find, are they? Take care, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, see you again soon for more videos. Bye for now.